Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today I'm doing the game retrospective for Kingdom Hearts 1. And I'm not sure if anyone's missed the memo, but there is that game coming out next week. I think it's called Kingdom Hearts 3. So in the build-up to it, I will be doing one of these every day, covering a different game in the Kingdom Hearts series, before rounding it off on the day before it releases worldwide with an episode about the journey to Kingdom Hearts 3, everything that's happened since Dream Drop Distance released in 2012. Now, a game retrospective is something that I've done once before with another game, but I take a game that I've got some kind of history with, as I do with every Kingdom Hearts game, and then I talk a little bit about the actual history of the game, but also my own personal history, and then rounding off with kind of a mini review before finishing with a little bit about the legacy of the game, if the game has a legacy, of course. And of course, throughout all of these videos, I will be freely talking about events that take place during the game, so if you're worried about spoilers for a game that's been out for 17 years, then play it. Kingdom Hearts, of course, was developed by Squaresoft, as they were still called then. It's the only Kingdom Hearts game that wasn't done by Square Enix, but in conjunction with Disney Interactive, although their role in actual development was minor. It released exclusively for the PS2 in March of 2002 in Japan, before being released everywhere else September of the same year, and then a year later it got a final mix version which added in some of the stuff which had been added for the international release, plus a little bit more. That version was then released worldwide as part of the 1.5 remastered collection on PS3 in 2013, and then again on 1.5 plus 2.5 on PS4 in 2017. But Kingdom Hearts' story actually begins with a game which has nothing to do with Squaresoft or Disney. That is Super Mario 64. That released in 1996 and took the world by storm. It was the first time you ever really had a character that you could completely control 360 degrees in a 3D area, and you could have like a hub world and you would go into different worlds and you'd be able to explore and try and find things in them and that sort of thing. And some senior people at Squaresoft, including Shinji Hashimoto and Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, thought they wanted to have a go at some game like this. Probably not as a platformer, but instead an RPG, the thing that Squaresoft was more well known for. Now at that time, Square was a good developer. They'd made quite a lot of games, but for the most part they were fairly niche appeal outside of Japan. It wasn't until a year later, in 1997, that Final Fantasy VII released and put Squaresoft on the map worldwide. However, they still didn't really have anything that would allow you to explore a bunch of differently themed worlds in a way that would potentially be as popular as Mario. So they needed something else, which, surprise surprise, was Disney. There is this myth about Shinji Hashimoto meeting a Disney executive in a lift and pitching the idea of Kingdom Hearts to him there. Not entirely true. They did share an office building together, but however it actually turned out, Squaresoft did actually push the idea onto Disney, and Disney were all on board with it. And eventually Tetsuya Nomura was chosen to direct the game, which would come for the upcoming PS2. And it could have been very different, because Squaresoft wanted Mickey Mouse to be the main character, and that makes sense really, doesn't it? If it's more about exploration and not so much about the story and its own thing. A Disney game, if you're going to explore it with any single person, Mickey Mouse is sensible. Disney didn't really want that though, because they weren't sure if this was going to be successful, so they didn't want to have their mascot be front and center for something that could be an absolute disaster. Disney's all about the image, remember. So they suggested, why not use Donald Duck instead? And that, again, makes sense. If you can't use Mickey, use Donald. But ultimately, the director won. Nomura, probably with encouragement from Sakaguchi, decided that the game needed to stand on its own, and it couldn't just be a Disney game with just Disney things. It had to have something of its own. So he decided to have its own original character, have another two original characters around him, and then have an original villain at the end that's pulling the strings, with the rest of the cast built up of Disney characters, which just allowed it to actually stand on its own. And, well, for the long run of the series, it seems to have been a successful move that Kingdom Hearts has its own identity beyond just being Final Fantasy and Disney. And then Kingdom Hearts was born. And speaking of Kingdom Hearts, the name came from the Animal Kingdom, which had recently opened at one of the Disney parks, and Nomura was thinking really that this game, at least in this original form, was a lot about going around and exploring Disney stuff. Basically, a game to somewhat match the experience of going around a Disney park. So, Kingdom was decided to be the name. However, he didn't like it on its own, so he thought he wanted to add something else on, and as the story developed, Hearts became central to it, so Kingdom Hearts. And then the game released and was very successful, as I'm sure we all know. For me, of course, I was 6 at the time that the game released. I didn't know any of this. I didn't even know what a PS2 was until one day my dad and brother came in holding this box and were like, yeah, this is a PlayStation 2. Well, I didn't know what a PlayStation 1 was, so that was always nice. I had a Super Nintendo at the time, but that was the only thing that I'd played. So this PS2 was quite a lot more powerful and was going to be able to do a lot more things, but it came with 3 games. There was a football game that wasn't very good, a racing game that wasn't very good, and then the third game, which, you guessed it, was Kingdom Hearts. Naturally, being a 6-year-old, I was attracted to it by looking on the back cover and seeing Tarzan and Aladdin and Disney characters like that made that, out of obviously the 3, be the one I was most interested in. However, being the third child, I didn't actually get to play it that much on the first day, or for a little while after. I did eventually get around to playing it, with one problem. We didn't have a memory stick, so a lot of my earliest memories of Kingdom Hearts are just playing the first hour or 2 of the game over and over and over. Which, of course, in those days also meant having to watch the entire opening cutscene every day, all of the tutorial cutscenes and the other cutscenes every single day. Also, very little Disney in the early sections, of course, so it was the game standing on its own because I still really loved it. And then when we got a memory card and could actually move on to the Disney worlds, that was like being kind of thrown into the whole universe from nothing. But for Kingdom Hearts 1 specifically, not for any of the other games, there is a kind of family aspect to it that makes me remember it fondly, because I would play it with my siblings, and I was, again, the third child. My older brother and sister were a few years older than me, so they were obviously a lot better at the game. But when we got to difficult boss fights and that kind of thing, we'd take it in turns to see who could beat them first, which would normally be my older brother, but it does mean, of course, with the unskippable cutscenes, that certain ones like, hey, not Clayton, and there's no way you're taking Kyrie's heart, are practically ingrained into my head, and whenever they come on, if I'm playing Kingdom Hearts 1 now, I have to watch the cutscene and recite the lines as they're coming, and probably before a lot of the time, so that's always nice. Of course, none of my siblings actually played any of the games afterwards, so from then on it was more my thing, but Kingdom Hearts 1 certainly was our thing for a while, even if, when I got the game later, I was again the only one playing it. And that's my own story with Kingdom Hearts, so the mini review sort of section, I'm mainly talking about the version that exists on the PS4 in 1.5 plus 2.5. It's the most convenient for me to play. And how does it hold up then? It's a game that released quite a while ago, but I think it's aged fairly well. It's got a little bit of the kind of clunkiness that's present in a lot of early 3D games. By the time we were getting to the PS2 era, this was starting to sort itself out. But this was still Squaresoft's first 3D action RPG, so there are some teething problems there, but for the most part, especially once you get further on, you unlock combo modifiers and that kind of thing, plus like high jump and glide and all that, it certainly feels a lot more fluid. I think the thing that's probably held it back is a graphical thing. Now, the game looks nice, the worlds look nice, most of the characters look nice, with one exception. In the cutscenes, you've got the flappy mouth, static face cutscene with different sort of face texture completely from the other ones that is existing in pretty much every Kingdom Hearts game, but Kingdom Hearts 1 is the only one where this happens for close-ups, which is not always good and does sort of take you out of it a little bit. But apart from that, I think it's aged mostly well graphically. It still looks quite nice. And as far as the combat goes, it's fairly simple. It's, you've got attack, magic, item, summon, as in command menu, that has been translated over from the turn-based Final Fantasy games and is now here in Kingdom Hearts. You select what you want to do from the command menu, then you've got some defensive things that you have on square, i.e. guard and dodge roll. And one good thing is that, yes, there are limited options, but most of them are useful at certain points. All the different magic spells have their own uses. Fire is a homing attack and does more damage than the others. Blizzard's more like a shotgun, area of effect. Thunder rains down from the skies on everything. Cure, well, it cures you. There is one problem with Cure, which is once you unlock MP Rage and Leaf Bracer, it's basically impossible to die because every time you get hit you have enough MP to cure again. But that's that. Gravity, extremely useful against larger enemies. Aero, of course, is very useful, particularly once you unlock later versions of it and you can, hurt enemies just by touching them. And then Stop, stops enemies. Does what it says on the tin, I suppose. The summons are a little bit less versatile. They're mostly there just for damage dealing, with two exceptions, and they're alright. They're good to kind of get a decent amount of damage, but I never find that I'm kind of falling back on them whenever I need some help. With two exceptions, because Bambi gives you MP orbs, so it's kind of like a proto-Stitch, and Tinkerbell is, if it was a Final Fantasy game, she's regen and she's also auto-life, which is a nice combo, and I tend to use her in the boss fights where they've got kind of big attacks that can practically wipe you out in one go. And then later in the game you unlock limits, and these are all really nice. The limits in this game are very special. It's the feeling when you're kind of getting better at the game and Sora's getting stronger. It's a nice thing to go together, and these limits are a good way of expressing how far Sora's come. Strike rate, of course, is probably the most useful because you are completely invincible as long as it's on. So really, the combat system, I think it holds up quite well. I think it's not going to be like the best combat in the world ever, but it's mostly fairly good. However, I think you are best off playing on the hardest difficulty because on easier ones, you tend to get the mash X to win kind of thing, which basically everyone who doesn't play the game on the hardest difficulty thinks Kingdom Hearts 1 is. But I think where the combat shines really is with the battles against normal enemies, particularly in endurance events like the Colosseum, which is at its best in Kingdom Hearts 1 because it's no gimmicks. It's just you fight a bunch of enemies and you win, and then you move on with your life. You don't have time limits or you can't use summons here or you can't use drive forms. You just have your abilities and fun. And that's where the game shines, because the Heartless are all designed in an interesting way that bring out the best in the combat. The boss fights, I would say, probably not so much. They're not awful. I mean, we'll get onto games which have way worse boss fights, with some exceptions, like Ansem 3. Terrible. Flying away from lasers for half an hour until you can eventually get one hit, but normally be hit by a laser if you even dare to do that. Not the most fun fight, but there are some really good boss fights in here. I think the second Riku fight in Hollow Bastion, as well as being legendary for having the unskippable cutscene, is a really well-designed fight, and the Ansem 2 fight is, I think, the best fight in the game, certainly of the story fights. But for the most part, they revolve around this big thing that hurls attacks at you with and you hit it until it dies, and it's not particularly great. But for a first game, I think they're fairly good. And there are two parts of Kingdom Hearts 1 that tend to be criticised more than any other, and that is the platforming and the camera. As far as the platforming goes, I honestly think it's fine. It's not like Mario good or anything. The jump is a little bit odd, but once you get used to it, it's consistent. It's not like the game's making you clip through solid floors or anything like that, as 0.2 likes to do. It's mostly consistent. It's not great, but it's functional. The camera, yeah, I can see the problem there. It's much improved in the HD remasters. When you were using the shoulder buttons, it wasn't great. When you've got full 360 control of it, that's a lot better. There are some issues where, the camera will get a bit too close to someone. Sora at least disappears when the camera's too close behind him, but the same doesn't happen for your party members. So when you're in, a narrow hallway with Beast, he's taken up like half of the screen, and that can cause some problems. I don't think it's like debilitating or anything. I never really find that like I'm dying because the camera is bad or anything, but that's definitely one of the biggest problems in Kingdom Hearts 1. And then finally, the story. This tends to be most people's favourite Kingdom Hearts story, and I don't necessarily agree, but I do really like the story in this game. It is quite straightforward. You've got the princesses being taken, and Sora has to just go and rescue them, and that's pretty much it. You find out there's a puppet master, there's Heartless and Keyblades and all that stuff. But yeah, it is fairly straightforward, but it works really well. It hits some emotional beats. The ending is really nice in a kind of bittersweet way, something Kingdom Hearts is kind of known for. But the strong point of the story is Sora, Donald and Goofy and their burgeoning relationship as they go from reluctant allies to the best of friends. And that's just a delight every time I play Kingdom Hearts 1. I love it, and I never thought that there would be a game where I would be having emotional investment in Donald, Duck and Goofy, but the game does it. And that's Kingdom Hearts 1. The game obviously did have a massive legacy because there are all the other Kingdom Hearts games. It's really captured the has of people all over the world, and it's phenomenal. So, what do you think about Kingdom Hearts 1? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section, and by the way, if you do, I will read them, not straight away, because I've been intense spoiler dodging for like a month and a half already. I'm not going to throw that away by risking going into comments about other Kingdom Hearts video this close to 3. But if you can share your stories of your experience with Kingdom Hearts, that would be great. And I'll read them after playing 3 and respond and all that lovely stuff. And while you're down there, please like this video if you did, and if you liked it, then check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you for watching.